You're sitting there, helpless, as the most powerful man on earth walks away with your wife. The world around you stands still, your body frozen in place as you can't speak, can't act. In the silence, the murmurs of 50 other senators are barely audible, their wine cups trembling in their hands. Some of them are praying she will return. You, on the other hand, pray she says nothing that might get you both killed. The minutes stretch out like hours. Every passing second feels like an eternity. Finally, he brings her back, but it's not just to return her to your side. No, he sits down casually, pours himself a glass of wine, and then right in front of everyone begins to recount, in sickening detail, exactly what just happened in that room. The others around the table stare at their plates in discomfort. Your wife remains vacant, staring at nothing, and you smile, you nod, you have to, you thank him. The alternative, watching your children die. This wasn't madness. This wasn't some random act of cruelty. This was a machine system built with surgical precision to destroy the human soul. The mastermind behind it learned everything he knew from watching his entire family slaughtered by the previous emperor. His name was Caligula. What he did to Rome is so deeply disturbing, so methodically evil, that 2,000 years later, we still can't quite grasp how one man could devise such psychological warfare. If you believe that the history of our darkest figures should not be forgotten, then please like this video and subscribe. Your support helps unearth stories from the most chilling corners of our past. Now, let's return to the man who turned cruelty into an art form. Stick with me, because what you're about to hear only gets worse. And the most horrifying part isn't just the atrocities he committed. It's that the system he created outlasted him. To understand how Caligula came to be the architect of such terror, we need to travel back to his childhood. He wasn't born evil, he was manufactured, and the process began when he was just 7 years old. Picture the scene. It's the year 14 AD, and a young boy, no older than 7, is running through a Roman military camp. He's dressed in a tiny legionnaire's uniform, complete with little boots and armor. The soldiers, hardened men who've conquered vast territories, laugh as they lift him up and toss him into the air. They call him Caligula, which means little boots. He is the son of Germanicus, Rome's greatest general since Julius Caesar. The soldiers adore his father and, in turn, they adored the boy. To them, he's their mascot, their good luck charm. Everywhere he goes, little Caligula follows, and the soldiers genuinely believe that this child brings them victory. This boy grows up thinking he is invincible, surrounded by the most powerful army in the world, loved and protected. He has no idea what's about to unfold. Then, at the age of 8, his father dies. The official cause, a sudden illness. The whispered cause, poison, administered by someone close to the emperor, maybe even the emperor himself. By the time Caligula turns 8, the machine begins dismantling his family. His mother is dragged from their home, falsely accused of treason. His older brother is imprisoned, starved, and tortured. His second brother is exiled to an island, where guards torment him until he smashes his own skull against the walls to end his suffering. One by one, Caligula's family is erased, and the young boy watches it all. By the time he reaches 19, he's the last one left, the sole survivor of his bloodline. Then, the summons arrives. Emperor Tiberius, the man responsible for destroying his family, calls for him. Caligula is brought to the island of Capri, a paradise-stand prison, far away from Rome and the Senate, where no one can object to the emperor's actions. Historians like Suetonius and Tacitus describe Capri as a house of horrors, and Tiberius as a paranoid, depraved man, surrounded by astrologers and yes-men, inventing new cruelties simply because he was bored. Into this toxic environment steps teenage Caligula. He knows Tiberius murdered his family, but he can't show it. One wrong look, one flash of grief, and he's dead. So instead of fighting it, he becomes a master at playing the game. Suetonius writes, "There never was a better servant or a worse master." Caligula learns to suppress all his humanity. He watches, observes, and excels in his role. He becomes exactly what Tiberius wants: obedient, entertaining, harmless. For 6 years, he plays this role perfectly, but in 37 AD, Tiberius dies. Some say naturally, others say Caligula suffocated him with a pillow. Either way, the 19-year-old hostage is now the most powerful man in the world. Rome celebrates, thinking they've just crowned the son of the beloved Germanicus. They have no idea that they've crowned someone who spent 6 years learning how to break people from one of the greatest monsters in Roman history. For 7 months, everything seems perfect. But then, Caligula falls ill. When he wakes up, it's not the same man who went to sleep. Something inside him has changed. What happened during those fevered days, we may never know. But when he recovers, something in him has shattered, and Rome is about to experience the monster he had been hiding all along. Caligula knew how to bury every trace of humanity inside him. He observed, studied, and transformed into exactly what Tiberius desired: obedient, entertaining, harmless. For 6 years, he played this role flawlessly. Then, in 37 AD, Tiberius died. Some claim natural causes, while others whisper that Caligula smothered him with a pillow. Regardless, the 19-year-old prisoner becomes the most powerful man on earth. Rome erupts in celebration, believing they've just crowned the beloved son of Germanicus. What they don't realize is that they've handed the reins to a man who spent 6 years learning the art of breaking human spirits from one of the greatest monsters in Roman history. For 7 months, everything seems perfect, but then Caligula falls ill, and the person who awakens is no longer the same. What happened during his fevered state, we may never know, but when he recovered, something within him had snapped. Rome was about to witness the true face of the monster he had been hiding. What I'm about to describe is not the random violence of a madman, it's the work of a methodical architect. Caligula built a system, a terror machine with 5 distinct acts, each designed to destroy a different part of the human soul. And what's truly horrifying is how deliberate it all was. Act 1. The sister goddess Caligula had 3 sisters, but one, Drusilla, was different. Ancient sources suggest their relationship crossed lines that even Rome found unsettling. Whether the rumors of incest were true or simply propaganda, it didn't matter. The Roman world believed them, and Caligula didn't just allow the rumors, he encouraged them. Then Drusilla died, and what happened next reveals the core of Caligula's cruel system. Instead of just mourning, Caligula weaponized grief. First, he had the Senate declare Drusilla a goddess, not just in metaphor, but officially. Temples were erected in her honor, and Romans were forced to worship her. Then he declared a period of mourning. Here's where it becomes truly monstrous. It was now a capital crime to laugh, to bathe, or even to have dinner with your family. Imagine living in such a society. Your child cracks a joke at breakfast. Do you laugh? Do you discipline them for acting like a child? Every moment of joy becomes a potential death sentence. Caligula is making Rome feel his personal loss whether they want to or not. He's learned how to legislate emotion, criminalizing happiness, and forcing his inner torment onto the entire empire. And once he realizes that he can control the emotions of the masses, he begins to experiment with what else he can take from them. Act 2. The Imperial brothel. The next part is so disturbing that even historians debate whether it actually happened or was later embellished. According to ancient sources, Caligula established a brothel inside the imperial palace, not for himself, but as a business for the public. And the people employed in this brothel weren't common prostitutes. No, they were the sons and daughters of Rome's nobility, the aristocrats, the senators, the very families who governed provinces and commanded legions. Caligula had heralds announce the prices on the streets, different rates for married women, unmarried women, and special rates for virgins from senatorial families. And here's where it becomes particularly cruel. Caligula allegedly kept meticulous ledgers, detailed records of transactions, names, dates, and prices. The bureaucratic documentation of human degradation. Imagine the psychological toll this would have taken on Roman noblemen. These men prided themselves on their family honor and their lineage that stretched back generations. Their names meant something. Now, their daughters are being advertised like livestock in the streets, with a ledger recording every detail, and they can do nothing about it, because the alternative is execution. Caligula isn't just taking their body, he's stripping them of the one thing they value more than life itself: their reputation, their legacy, their name. Act 3. The banquet of predation. Public humiliation is powerful, but Caligula realized something even more devastating: private humiliation witnessed publicly. This brings us to Act 3, the banquet of predation. Imagine the scene again, but now you understand the context. You're at an imperial banquet, surrounded by 50 or more senators, their wives, and various members of Roman society. Everyone is drinking wine, but the atmosphere is thick with unease. Caligula stands and walks slowly through the room. His eyes scan the women, evaluating them as if they were livestock. He stops at your table, looks at your wife, and without a word, takes her hand. He leads her away. You sit frozen, helpless. No one dares to intervene. You watch as your wife is taken, and you can do nothing. You sit there, your heart racing, praying she will be returned. 20 minutes pass. You feel like you've aged years in that time. Finally, Caligula brings her back to the table. She sits down, her eyes vacant, unable to meet your gaze. And then, in front of everyone, Caligula begins to describe what just happened in that room. He compares your wife to other women, rates her performance, and makes jokes about it. You have to smile. You have to laugh. You have to thank him, or your family will be destroyed. This is not just about taking women. This is about destroying you, tearing apart your dignity and authority as a man. Caligula doesn't just want to humiliate you. He wants to obliterate everything that gives you power. He knows that in Roman society, your ability to protect your family is your power. He's taken that from you. You're at an imperial banquet, surrounded by 50, maybe 100 senators and their wives, all sipping wine that tastes like fear. The air is thick with tension. Everyone knows what's about to happen, but no one dares to speak. Then, Caligula stands. The room falls silent. His eyes scan the crowd, slowly moving between tables. He doesn't just look. He evaluates. He's choosing. His gaze stops at your table. He looks at your wife, his eyes cold and calculating, like a man assessing livestock. He checks her appearance, her hair, her body, her every detail without a word to you, without even acknowledging your existence. Before you can react, he takes her hand. Without permission, without hesitation, he leads her away. You're frozen. The man next to you stares down into his wine. Everyone is pretending nothing is happening. They know, just like you, that if you stand up, if you speak, if you show any emotion at all, it will be the end of you, and your children will pay the price. So you sit there, helpless, drink in hand, waiting. 20 minutes pass, but it feels like 20 years. The conversation around you is forced. Brittle people trying to pretend things are normal. A joke is made, but it dies in the air, too heavy to laugh at. Finally, he brings her back. She sits down beside you, her eyes hollow, unable to meet your gaze. And then, Caligula sits too. He doesn't leave. He stays, right there at the table, with all eyes on him. He begins, in front of everyone, to describe, in graphic, clinical detail, what just happened in that room. He compares her to other senators' wives, rates her performance, mocks her in ways that leave you speechless. Your colleagues stare at their plates, your wife stares at nothing, and you have to smile, you have to nod, you have to thank him, because if you don't, the consequences will be far worse. This isn't just humiliation, it's destruction. He isn't just violating your wife, he's dismantling everything that makes you a man in Roman society. Your ability to protect your family, your authority, your dignity, he's taking it all, in front of everyone who matters. And tomorrow, you'll have to walk back into this same room, into the same people's eyes, and pretend nothing happened, even though everyone knows exactly what did. This is the genius of the machine. He doesn't just break individuals, he destroys the very fabric of society itself. By making everyone complicit, everyone a witness to someone else's degradation, he tears apart the system of power that holds everything together. But this isn't the worst of it. What comes next is even more horrific. Modern psychologists have studied it as a case in systematic psychological torture. Caligula realizes there's one bond more powerful than marriage, the bond between parent and child. And that's when the true nightmare begins. Act 4 of The Machine, The Grieving Father. What follows is almost unbearable to describe. If you need to take a moment, I understand. Caligula starts executing people not for crimes, not for treason, but because he's bored, or annoyed, or just wants to see what happens, and then he develops a new rule. If he's executing someone's son, the father must watch. Not from a distance, not as a spectator, but up close, front row. Here's where it goes from cruel to catastrophic. The historian Suetonius records one specific incident that reveals the full scope of Caligula's horror. A father watches his son being executed. Then, Caligula has him brought to dinner that same night, with his son's body still warm. The father sits there, forced to eat, while Caligula watches him. He studies his face, looking for any sign of emotion, any sign that the father is grieving, showing pain. Because if he shows any emotion at all, Caligula knows he hasn't broken him yet. There's still something human left to destroy. The father eats food he can't taste, speaks words he can't hear, all while his son's lifeless body lies somewhere, cold and abandoned. Caligula watches him, studying every twitch, every expression. He's not just taking your child, he's taking your right to grieve. He's turning the deepest human bond into a weapon, because now, if you love someone, that love becomes a vulnerability. The more you care, the more you can be hurt. This is where the cruelty reaches its peak. He's not just taking lives, he's destroying everything that makes life worth living. For those who love, for those who have families, for those who care, Caligula is systematically turning their humanity against them. But there's a flaw in his machine. While he's busy destroying senators and noblemen, people trained to endure humiliation, people who understand power and can rationalize their suffering, he makes one critical mistake. He targets the wrong person, a soldier. Act 5 of the machine. The wrong man. His name was Gaius Caesar, a senior officer in the Praetorian Guard, the elite force that protected the emperor. These were the men who stood by Caligula's side every day, armed and lethal, trained to fight for the empire. Gaius, however, had one physical trait that seemed to amuse Caligula endlessly: a high-pitched voice. Every day, new jokes and mockery were thrown his way, making his suffering a constant. And here's where Caligula's cruelty becomes disturbingly routine. When it was Cassius's turn to ask for the daily password, a simple military protocol in front of all the other guards, Caligula would assign him embarrassing, humiliating words like Venus or Peppus, deliberately effeminate or sexual terms meant to provoke laughter from the other soldiers. For Caligula, it was just casual humor, a small distraction in his day. But for Cassius, it was constant poisoning of his dignity, drop by drop, every day. The power of Caligula's cruelty lay not in physical pain but in psychological torment. What Caligula failed to realize, however, was the fatal flaw in his calculation. Senators could endure humiliation because they had families, estates, and legacies to protect. They understood that their suffering was part of the game of survival. But Cassius was no senator. He was a soldier, a man hardened by battle, trained for violence. And Caligula had just made the fatal error of targeting the wrong man. In his arrogance, Caligula assumed that fear and humiliation would always win. He didn't understand the most basic rule of predators: never corner something that can kill you. Cassius had endured enough, and one day, it would take less than 60 seconds for everything to change. On January 24th, 41 AD, Caligula attended the theater in a good mood, preparing for a play later in the day. He was organizing games, arranging performances, seemingly secure in his invincibility. After the show, he decided to leave the theater through a narrow, dimly lit underground corridor that connected it to the palace. It was cramped, claustrophobic, and dark. The conspirators were waiting. As Caligula approached, this was the moment that would change Roman history forever. A guard, Cassius, stepped forward to check in with the emperor. This was routine. Guards always checked in with Caligula. But today, Cassius was carrying out his plan. Caligula, still unaware of the impending danger, gave his usual mocking, dismissive response to the day's password. His last words. Cassius, filled with years of rage, screamed, "Take this," and drove his sword up into Caligula's ribs. The emperor stumbled, but there was no escape. The corridor was narrow, and the conspirators swarmed. 30 stab wounds were delivered in a matter of seconds, the culmination of 4 years of torment, humiliation, and terror. The man who had terrorized Rome, who had crafted a system of fear and brutality, was dead. But the horror didn't end there. The conspirators didn't stop with Caligula. They turned their attention to his wife Caesonia. She had heard the screams. She knew what had happened. She begged, she pleaded, trying to reason with the men who had just killed an emperor. But it was no use. They stabbed her to death. Then, the unthinkable. They found the nursery. Caligula's daughter, Julia Drusilla, was just 2 or 3 years old. As she cried for her mother, a soldier picked her up and, without hesitation, swung her head first into a marble wall. It was a brutal, calculated act, made to ensure there were no witnesses, no survivors who could grow up and avenge Caligula's death. This was what happened when the machine broke. It didn't just stop. It consumed everything connected to it. For a brief moment, there seemed to be hope. The Senate gathered. The people began discussing what Rome could become. They debated whether to restore the Republic, to rid themselves of emperors entirely. For the first time in generations, Rome dared to dream of a different future. But while the Senate was still deliberating, the Praetorian Guard made a decision. They began looting the palace jewelry, coins, anything valuable. One of them, however, found something behind a curtain, a middle-aged man, trembling, with a limp and a stutter. Claudius Caligula's uncle, the family embarrassment. No one had ever taken him seriously. Everyone thought he was harmless, brain damage from childhood illness. But the guard didn't see a fool. He saw an emperor. The Praetorian Guard carried Claudius on their shoulders to their camp, proclaiming him emperor. And while the Senate continued debating the future of the Republic, the army had already made its decision. The system survived. But here's what haunts me about this story. Caligula ruled for less than 4 years. Just 4 years, in the grand span of Roman history. That's a blink, a fleeting moment. Yet, here we are, 2,000 years later, still talking about him. Why? Because Caligula demonstrated a terrifying truth about power. He showed how the machinery of a state, its laws, military, economy, and bureaucracy, can be wielded as instruments of personal psychological warfare. Caligula didn't just operate outside the system, he turned the system into his weapon. The ledgers in the Imperial brothel, that's bureaucracy doing its job. The forced mourning for his sister Drusilla, that's law enforcement carrying out his orders. The banquets where he violated senators' wives, that's Imperial hospitality doing its part. Every atrocity Caligula committed was technically legal because he was the law. And when he died, the system didn't die with him. It found a new operator. That's the true horror. Not that one man was a monster, but that the machine he built kept running even after he was gone. Look at what came after. Nero burning Rome and blaming the Christians. Domitian executing people for merely looking at him the wrong way. Commodus forcing senators to watch him fight as a gladiator in the arena. Elagabalus committed acts so vile, they can't even be described here. The blueprint Caligula laid out kept evolving. What Caligula revealed was a truth about power that Rome could never forget. When one person controls everything, military, law, economy, culture, there's no mechanism to stop them. No checks, no balances. The only thing left is waiting for them to die or be killed. And even then, the system simply finds someone new to take control. Suetonius once wrote that Caligula was the best of servants and the worst of masters. He learned tyranny by pretending to be the perfect subject. Studying under Tiberius, he learned every technique, every tool of psychological manipulation. And then, he perfected it. That's the real warning. The greatest threats don't announce themselves. They learn, adapt, and wear the mask of loyalty until they no longer need it. And there's one more thing. After Claudius became emperor, he ordered the destruction of most of Caligula's records. The ledgers, the correspondences, the documents all burned. The official histories we have today were written by men like Suetonius and Tacitus. Decades later, working from fragmented memories, rumors, and the surviving scraps. What I've just described, the 5 acts, the systematic terror, the machine, this is only what survived the purge. Imagine what was lost. Imagine what was so disturbing that even in an empire that crucified thousands and fed people to lions, they decided it needed to be erased from history. Caligula ruled for 3 years, 9 months, and 8 days. In that short time, he built a machine that taught future tyrants how to break human beings. Systematically and psychologically, completely. And that blueprint, it never disappeared. It's still out there. And now, we're left with one final question.